You know how we all think we could do a better job than the people running our favorite teams or directing the latest blockbuster? Well, when it comes to the gaming industry, it really feels like fans might actually have a point. The decisions coming from gaming executives often seem so out of touch that it's almost laughable. Take Microsoft, for instance. They've been stumbling for years, especially with the Xbox division. Phil Spencer, who's been at the helm for a while now, hasn't exactly turned things around. Sure, he introduced Game Pass, but it didn't blow up the way they hoped. And then there's the massive acquisition of Activision Blizzard and Bethesda, which cost a fortune, but hasn't really boosted their console business. So here's the scoop. Some well-known insiders are saying that a big Xbox exclusive might be making its way to PS5 soon, and we could hear about it as early as next week. There's some back and forth about which game it could be, but the insiders are all leaning towards an announcement at Gamescom 2024. The rumor kicked off on Reset Era, where insider Shinobi602 mentioned that a big Xbox game is going to be announced for PlayStation next week.
A great success!
After that, another insider, EXTAS1SESTV, jumped in on X and claimed the game is Forza Horizon 5, and it's apparently coming to PS5 in the next few months. However, Insider Gaming, which is run by Tom Henderson, another reliable source, also heard that Forza Horizon 5 is the game in question, but Jez Corden from Windows Central isn't fully on board with that. He believes Forza Horizon 5 is in development for PS5, but doesn't think it's the game that's being announced next week. One thing they all agree on, it's not Starfield. That one's staying Xbox exclusive for now. Microsoft has a massive presence planned for Gamescom 2024, which kicks off on August 21st, so we'll see what they've got in store. Their strategy seems non-existent at this point, just throwing money at problems and hoping something sticks. It's like they're waiting for Call of Duty to save the day by boosting Game Pass, but let's be real, that's not going to happen. And then they'll move on to the next big hope, just like they've been doing since the Xbox One era. Here's where things get interesting, or terrifying, depending on how you look at it. The US government is getting pretty aggressive with antitrust laws, eyeing big companies like Google and Amazon. Microsoft, being the giant that it is, could easily be next on the chopping block, especially with their claim that gaming is a core pillar of the company. If that's true, then Xbox might just be a liability they can't afford to keep. So, one suggestion floating around is that Microsoft should sell the Xbox division, maybe to Nintendo. I mean, it sounds wild, but there's some logic to it. Nintendo and Xbox don't really compete directly, so it wouldn't create a monopoly. Plus, Nintendo usually knows what they're doing, unlike the current Xbox leadership. Of course, this is all just speculation. Nintendo is notoriously frugal, and even though they could afford it, they're unlikely to splurge on such a big acquisition. But with the way things are going, especially with the antitrust pressure mounting, Microsoft might be looking for a way to offload Xbox and make it seem like they're making a big sacrifice, when in reality, they might be happy to be rid of it. The idea of Sony releasing its PS4 games on Nintendo's next console, even if they don't go multi-format on Xbox, is a bold and intriguing concept. While it might seem far-fetched at first, there are several factors that make this idea worth considering. Nintendo has always carved its own path in the gaming industry, and its hardware, like the Switch, targets a different audience than PlayStation or Xbox. Despite this, the Switch's success has demonstrated that there is a massive market for well-made, portable gaming experiences. With the rumored power of the upcoming Switch 2, it could likely handle PS4-level games, making it a viable platform for Sony's extensive library of titles. Sony has been vocal about the rising costs of game development and the need to find new avenues for growth. The Switch 2 could provide an excellent opportunity for Sony to extend the lifespan of its PS4 titles, tapping into a new audience that might not own a PlayStation console. With the cost of porting games likely being lower than developing new titles from scratch, this could be a profitable move for Sony. Microsoft has already begun embracing a more multi-format strategy, releasing some of its titles on Nintendo platforms, such as the Ori series. This strategy has not only broadened the reach of their games, but also softened the competitive landscape between Xbox and Nintendo. Sony could follow a similar path with the Switch 2, but with a more selective approach, potentially withholding these ports from Xbox to maintain a competitive edge. The idea of Sony and Nintendo Nintendo collaborating more closely isn't as outlandish as it might seem. Historically, there hasn't been much direct competition between the two, and their game libraries appeal to different segments of the market. A closer relationship could benefit both companies, especially if it leads to innovative crossover content or even a Super Smash Bros. Style game featuring characters from both universes. However, this move wouldn't be without risks. Sony might worry about diluting its brand by sharing its exclusive titles with another platform. There's also the concern that it might undermine the PlayStation console itself if too many of its flagship titles become available elsewhere. Yet, given the current state of the industry, with live service games and rising development costs, Sony may need to consider such bold moves to sustain growth and remain competitive. And speaking of Switch 2, I got the scoop on release date, price, and specs. Let me say this, it's not what I expected. Here's the story. In a report on the Japanese financial website Kabutan, Yasuda says that he still expects the Nintendo Switch successor to be released in the first half of 2025. This aligns with rumors that developers aren't expecting the console before April of that year. Yasuda's predictions would then place the Switch 2 as releasing somewhere between April and July next year. Yasuda also predicts that the Nintendo Switch 2 could cost up to $500. He says the price may seem relatively low when assigned a dollar value, but also suggests it may be difficult for Japanese consumers to justify. He cites the fluctuation in the Japanese yen's price and the differences in the cost of living between the United States and Japan. Finally, Yasuda suggests that the successor to one of Nintendo's most successful ever consoles could be less powerful than the PS4 Pro. He expects that it will be, at best, equivalent to Sony's last generation console. However, it could fall short of the console's power. This is no major surprise, given that Nintendo typically values innovation over pure power. Still, consumers may balk at the fact that they're paying almost $500 for a console that's less powerful than something that was released in November 2016. While the report makes comparisons to Sony's consoles, it's expected that the Nintendo Switch's successor will be easier to pick up than the PS5, with Nintendo making plans to stop scalpers from grabbing the console. Alright guys, you know I'm all about positivity here, and you know I also sometimes fall victim on the hype. But with Black Myth Wukong, I was cautiously optimistic. Now I urge you not to go out and buy the PS5 version of the game yet, as nobody got review codes for the game on PS5, and it seems that Gameranx, the studio behind the game, are very controlling of what can be said and showed even in the reviews. I mean, they don't even let reviewers show the technical issues of the game besides just talking about it. This is giving me a mix of confusion about the whole thing, giving me Jedi Survivor flashbacks. So here's what Push Square had to say about the situation. We were super hyped about this game, and after putting over 10 hours into it, it's clear that the excitement wasn't completely misplaced. The combat is sharp, the visuals are stunning, and the game dives deep into Chinese mythology, which is really cool. But honestly, it feels like Gameranx might have gone a bit too heavy on the boss battles at the expense of everything else. Now, here's where the concerns start creeping in. Here's a quote from Push Square. We were really hoping to get our hands on the PS5 version, but instead, we were only given a PC code. That's left us with some nagging doubts about how well this game is actually going to run on Sony's console. This is a visually intense game with a lot of fast-paced action, so if the frame rates dip below 60 FPS, it could really drag down the experience. We'll have to wait for the full PS5 review to see if it holds up. As for the game itself, Wukong is packed with Chinese mythological creatures and intricate boss designs that make each encounter feel unique. But once you're not in the heat of battle, the game starts to lose its luster. The environments, while pretty, lack that cohesive, lived-in feel. It's more like a mix of different settings rather than a world that feels whole and connected. Another downer is the exploration aspect. Sure, there are hidden bosses and secret paths, but we never really felt the need to grind for XP like in games such as Elden Ring. The areas between bosses just don't feel as compelling, and the invisible walls we kept bumping into were a real immersion killer. To sum it up, while the boss fights are a highlight and the combat is satisfying, the rest of the game doesn't quite match up. Plus, we're left worrying about how it's going to perform on PS5. Let's hope those issues are sorted out by the time it launches on August 20th, because this game has the potential to be something special if it can pull it all together. The Astro PS5 DualSense controller has quickly become one of the most sought-after limited edition peripherals for the PS5, and it's back in stock for a limited time. Originally released with a highly positive reception for its design, the controller was quickly snapped up by players, and, unfortunately, scalpers also got in on the action, leading to inflated prices on resale platforms like eBay. Why this matters? For those who missed out on the initial release, this restock on Sony's PS Direct is a golden opportunity to secure the controller at its retail price before it's gone for good. Given the history of limited edition items selling out quickly, it's advisable to act fast if you're interested. The controller is set to ship before the launch of the upcoming Astro game on September 6, 2024. The Scalper Issue. Scalpers have made it increasingly difficult for genuine fans to purchase limited edition items at reasonable prices. The Astro DualSense controller has been no exception, with listings on eBay and other resale sites often asking for more than twice the retail price. While this is frustrating, it's a situation that has unfortunately become common in recent years, not just for gaming peripherals but across various limited edition products. Here's an interesting story from someone who decided to cancel their PS Plus subscription, and they have some solid reasons for doing so. It actually got me thinking about whether I should do the same. Why? Well, this month, PS Plus offered The Witcher 3 and Watch Dogs 2. I already own both of these games, along with almost all PlayStation exclusives since the PS4 era. For a newcomer to the platform, PS Plus is a fantastic value, providing access to a vast library of games. But for someone like me, with an extensive collection of games, the decision to cancel isn't that hard. It's worth considering whether PS Plus is still worth it if you already have most of the games being offered. Sure, there are benefits like online multiplayer and cloud saves, but if you primarily play single-player games or already own the titles you're interested in, it might be time to reconsider if the service is still valuable for you. So, here is what this person had to say about canceling his subscription, and I think a lot of us can relate. Canceling my PS Plus subscription was a decision I made after carefully considering my gaming habits and what the service offers. Here's why I decided it was no longer worth it for me. 1. I mainly play single-player games, which don't require an online subscription. While PS Plus is great for online multiplayer, I'm more into narrative-driven, immersive experiences, where I can take my time and enjoy the story. Even in multiplayer games like Apex Legends or Rogue Company, which I play occasionally, I don't need PS Plus because they're free to play online. 2. One of the biggest letdowns for me is that Sony's first-party titles aren't available on PS Plus on day one. While the service includes some fantastic games like Ghost of Tsushima and God of War, they arrived much later. On the other hand, Xbox Game Pass offers day one releases, which is something I find very appealing. I'm even considering trying out Xbox Game Pass in the future for this reason. 3. The PS Plus game catalog hasn't impressed me. I already own most of the games I want to play, and the rest of the catalog feels padded with titles that don't interest me. The Classics catalog does have some gems, but the dated graphics and gameplay aren't enticing enough for me to revisit those older games. Plus, I wish PS3 games were backward compatible rather than being limited to streaming. 4. I prefer to buy games rather than access them through a subscription. I enjoy owning my games, especially since titles can be removed from the service at any time. I also like to support developers directly, especially smaller indie studios, which is easier when purchasing games outright. 5. I've accumulated a massive collection of games over the years, mostly from sales. My backlog is extensive, and I'd rather focus on playing the games I already own than paying for a service that doesn't add much value to my experience.